I often say that mastery is in the gradual refinement. Literally, just yesterday, we were talking about when you have a lot of tools at your disposal, when there's various options within your domain, at face value, it allows you to do more. If you have the utensils, you could probably operate and outperform and execute anything on a surgeon level. In the same breath, it also means that the margin of error also increases because the requirement is also dependent on so many other variables. So your tools have to be sharp, your timing has to be impeccable, your bravery has to be beyond bold. And I think these components all come together to then equate you to what we call a master. Maybe there is varying degrees as to who is a master and who can take on the title, or at least deserving of. I say this to say because last year I watched a reel and it showcased my favorite anime of all time, Dragon Ball Z. I mean, ask any South African black kid, half us four, literally, we have nobody in the streets. And I didn't know it then, but this reel was sharing how through every training arc, Goku had a badge on his dojo uniform, right? The orange and blue. So you'll see there's this Japanese symbol by the chest, by the heart. And this symbol changes based on the master that he has throughout the whole entire series. So we're going to be measuring this thing from Dragon Ball when he's young, right up until perhaps the Buu Saga. So the symbol has a different name when he's training under Master Roshi, and we see the symbol change again when he trains, under King Kai. And this interesting thing happens. The symbol changes on his way to Namek. And the narrator of this whole entire reel says, this is the moment where Goku became his own master. And which is so interesting, right? Because sometimes it happens that you are your best teacher. There's the saying that when the student is ready, the master appears. And the opposite is also accurate. When the master is ready, the student appears. Sometimes it's you. You're the master. You're the student. Right? And I think life has this very interesting phenomena at play. And I think sometimes we undersell ourselves as our greatest teacher. I also read a book called For Every Problem There's a Spiritual Solution. And it speaks about having people around you as, great teachers. So your wife could be a great teacher, for instance, because she's the one person that is going to be consistently next to you and holding you accountable to your own greatness or the things that you said you're trying to become or let go of. Going back to the Dragon Ball Z analogy, it then happens that after that point, we all know what happens, probably and arguably one of the greatest, moment in television, he becomes a Super Saiyan. And so, for the most part, he sits in a new domain, completely a different paradigm to anything his masters had, perceived, for themselves and perhaps also for him. And I think sometimes we seek counsel from others, hoping they can understand and hoping that they know how to guide us and perhaps give us tricks and trades of what's to come, in a place where they completely have no interest or have no actual know about whatsoever. Not saying that you shouldn't ask for advice or you shouldn't lean against, elders or those that come before you. Truth be told, not considering you are the first of your kind to be here. I mean, that's the point of being a one of one. This experience, this lifetime, this moment, yada, 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 yada. All those things are literally being defined for the very first time by you, because you have this lived experience based on the name you were given, based on where you were born and who your parents are and your school and the people you encountered along this journey. So I tend to feel like sometimes I look around and I'm like, yo, where my people at? Where my people at? I need help. And I'm like, dog, it's you. You are here, bro. There's nothing else behind you except God. And I think it's so important to have that sense of bravery as we move forward in life and as we become who we're meant to become. So, concluding that analogy, I then start seeing towards the end of this reel, they say that at some point he no longer wears a badge. Because why must you declare that you are training under your own mastership? It's like, nah, this is just what it is. I'm me, and I think throughout the Boo saga, he doesn't wear it, because he's also concluded the course. He's reached maybe perhaps a happy state, or he's okay with where he's at in life. And I think we tend to feel like there's an extra step or there's an extra level past the current state of mastery, and I think we do too much beyond that. The okayness of being good and sharp with where you're at and what you've achieved. It could be the difference between being a legend and, tarnishing one's legacy. I'm not going to mention any names. But knowing when to quit, I think, is pretty cool. And perhaps this is the difference in the intuitiveness of certain masters and knowing when to shift into a different vertical, versus staying in that same horizontal. I just say these things because they sound cool and perhaps there is validity in it. But in conclusion, he then later takes on a new role because the adventure calls for something much higher and much greater. And then he has to become a student again. And I remember that clip saying, okay, cool. There's a time to learn. There's a time to teach. And there's just a time to be. And I think it's very interesting when you start understanding your season in it. And of course, understand the season around you. Because sometimes we don't want to go to school when it's time for us to learn. And sometimes we don't want to go to school when it's time for us to teach. And some days just require us to live, take every single thing that you've learned in the textbook and apply it practically in the world. Show up, become exactly who you were meant to be. And I can't really tell you where I'm at specifically at this point in my life. I do know that I've graduated from being a student, and there's a lot of practicality in the things that I need to execute. But I'm consistently always learning. There's that saying, what's the saying? It goes, jack of all trade, master of none, but a master of some is better than a master of one. something like that, something like that. And it speaks to those that seek to become polymaths, those that seek to be Renaissance man. And I've always seen myself as someone of that stature, a Picasso, you know, become an engineer in one part, become a painter in the other, dabble in politics, and various other fields that require your take. And I think that has to do more with being. And I remember watching this series called Master of None by Aziz Ansari, which sort of kind of speaks to the 30-plus-year-old who is in this somewhat responsible yet generic state of being where you're ticking the boxes because you have to. If you don't, then you're one of those old people that sort of kind of left the train station a little too early and you got left behind and all that other jazz club stuff. And I look at that series from a different light today to say that perhaps being a master of none is equally important. Perhaps you still need to learn. If anything, maybe you are a master. You just don't know it. Because also titles are a thing. Peer reviews. Now other people gotta chime in and say, yeah, he's right. It checks out. I don't say this to say I am one. But at some point, masterclass has to be put in session. And if you're watching me, then maybe I've mastered something. Maybe I've mastered me. And I think that should be enough. That should qualify someone to sit in front of the camera, sit in front of a mirror, sit in front of an audience, and share their story. That being said, Stagnot, my friends. Stagnot.